Thanks to Bones, Braun, DeAndre Jordan. Twists abound on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day every week. You can join us on all platforms if you make us your first listen, including YouTube, where folks are already in the chat. I didn't even announce I was doing a show, and folks are already in here. Philip Andrew Sowen, Big Honey's in here because Big Honey's always rocking with us. Daniel West, lots of folks in this talk about the Nuggets win over the Utah Jazz. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. I'm solo today on a Saturday. Hope your weekend is going great. I decided to do a solo show today. Adam is off. I didn't do one yesterday because I was like, by the time that I get through that show, if they lose to the Jazz or they beat the Jazz, the context will be entirely different. And lo and behold, it was. So I want to give you a weekend show back on Sunday night going into Monday, most likely. It'll either be Sunday night into Monday or Monday morning with our next episode, getting you set for the week as Nuggets do play on Sunday with a chance to make the Los Angeles Lakers 0-6 on the season. What a big game that is for the Lakers. All right. So let's go ahead and get into this. The Utah Jazz beat the Denver Nuggets on opening night, and then Nuggets got their chance to get revenge on them on Friday, and boy, did they, with a 117-101 victory that was not as close as that final score. There's a lot to kind of get into about this performance. The big takeaway, one, I do want to set the scene a little bit just in terms of like, what happened to Utah? Well, Utah has what I would consider to be at least like a small COVID outbreak. Multiple players, Rudy Gay was out yesterday with health and safety protocols. Walker Kessler is sick with a quote non-COVID. They're finding that a lot of times they test negative and then test positive later. I can relate. That happened to me. And so the Jazz were down a couple of guys, but most of their main guys were starting. I don't know how healthy they were. That team definitely looked tired, worn out. 3rd and 4 nights. They're facing it was a 5-7 spot for them today on a back-to-back set on Saturday as they're looking to beat the Memphis Grizzlies at home. So Utah was in a bad spot. The bigger thing, though, here is that the Denver Nuggets put together the kind of performance that you wanted to see from them this season. They need more of these types of games because they had so few. That was my big takeaway last night, is that last season, in what was such an injury-ravaged, difficult, just grind of a season for everyone, the team, management, coaches, media, fans. There were very few like, okay, they just kind of like nondescript, got some signature moments, fun game at home, cruise. Every game would be like a very difficult one where even when the starters would play well, the bench would surrender a huge run and get back into it. It was the opposite in this game. I will say that the starters' numbers are not impressive from a plus-minus perspective. Like Aaron Gordon played 21 minutes and played the Jazz to a neutral. It was a plus-minus of 0. Joker was +8. Good, not one of his like historic or awesome nights. +8, perfectly fine. He only shot 3 of 10 from the field. Michael Porter Jr. with 22 in the early first quarter. The big thing with the starters, and we're going to talk a lot about the bench in the second segment because they made sure this wasn't a contest. I think the Nuggets, I don't think the bench won this game. I think the bench made sure that the Jazz couldn't win this game. And the bench was phenomenal, and we'll get to them. What I will say is that the starters hit them with a run in the first quarter, and that was it. It was, as long as the bench does not have a nuclear meltdown like last year, the Nuggets are going to cruise. And not only did the Nuggets bench not fall apart, but they added on to the lead behind Busy Bones Highland, who racks up 26 points, 3 assists, 8 of 18 shooting, including 7 of 12 from 3-point range. He was 1 of 6 inside the arc, but when you're hitting 7 threes, it doesn't really matter. Each one seemingly longer from the court than the last. Just bone shots, right? Those long-distance three-pointers. The Jazz clearly had not read the scouting report on Bones and were willing to dare him to shoot those things, and he made him pay. He was fantastic, but it wasn't just him, and we'll get to the rest of the bench in the second segment. The reason I kind of want to mention the starters here is, look, the starters weren't bad. They hit a first quarter run that helped put away the Jazz and put them in a double-digit position. And they're going to do that more often than not. So in the third quarter, when the starters have a bad run, it's still okay because you don't wind up with a negative. Like, you're not losing 2 of the stints. Last year, I made a big deal of this, right? About how the starters needed to win 3 of their 4 stints in order for the Nuggets to win the game. This season, with the bench being better, that's down to 2. The Nuggets won their first quarter stint, and they won their second quarter stint with the starters, and that's really all you needed to do. Like, in the second quarter, Gordon again had a bad stint, and Joker, they actually got outscored in that second quarter a little bit, but it was fine because they built up such a big lead with the bench unit that it was okay. So the bench unit definitely made sure this was done. But the Nuggets starters played, I thought, great in that first quarter and really started to hit on all cylinders behind Michael Porter Jr., who had another pretty hilarious performance in that 22 points, 7 of 15 from the field, 4 of 5 from 3, massive shot making. Many of them, again, situations where you're like, are you sure that's a shot you want to up? He made it. Oh, are you sure that's where you're supposed to up? Nope, that went into. Porter was great on the glass last night. 13 boards, and he wasn't just tapping or finding loose ones. That was the Porter we saw 2 years ago on the glass. And if Porter gives you that kind of shooting, which he should most nights, maybe not 4 or 5, but oftentimes better than 50% from 3, and he gives you that kind of rebounding, that's a net positive. That's all you need. Michael Malone made a really interesting adjustment in terms of this rotation, and I asked about him after the game. So Porter plays about the first 4 or 5 minutes, and then he takes a sub early in the first quarter. So he gets subbed. Christian Braun comes in. Brown's the first guy off the bench, interestingly enough. He comes in, and then Porter returns late in that first quarter and runs with the bench unit in that second unit. And the lineup that they were able to get to was Bones Highland with DeAndre Jordan as his pick and roll partner, Michael Porter Jr. and Christian Braun, along with Jeff Green. And so Braun and MPJ space the floor, and Jeff Green acts as connector. And that's a lineup that works. And I asked Malone about it, and he said, honestly, Matt, we were trying to get to that early in the season, but we've had injuries. We've had minute restrictions on guys. And so it's hard to get to that rotation. That's the one that he wants. And it's a really, all the things that Adam and I talked about with the bench unit not working in those first couple of games, that lineup works. Because I kept saying, well, look, DJ's been fine. DJ hasn't been the problem. So what's making the bench not work? And, Adam said, they need more spacing. They need somebody in there to space it. And Malone also said, if we have the ability to, I want to make sure that we've got one starter on the floor at all times. He came to that realization after game 1. If you're a Nuggets fan, this is music to your ears that Michael Malone has said, we need to make sure that we've got one starter on the floor at all times. That's a massive adjustment from Malone to get away from the 5-man bench unit to make sure that you've got a starter in there because they're so good at spacing the court, because they bring so much. And in this game, even without KCP, you've got Bruce Brown who can run with that second unit. You've got Bruce Brown who can, fill in and do some of the connection work and sub these kind of different guys. So there's all these kind of components. And with the ability, this lineup of putting MPJ, and I think you can do this with maybe KCP and maybe Jamal when he's at full 35-minute rotation, it's just going to make that bench unit better, and you can adjust based off of what the matchup that you're facing is. But giving that bench unit an offensive look where you've got so much spacing around Bones Highland, along with DeAndre, who, again, last night, he wasn't just fine. Last night, DeAndre Jordan was great, and not just because he hit a three-pointer, but being able to get to it really matters. I want to stress this, that the Nuggets won a game and coasted where Jokic played 25 minutes, had 12 points, 10 boards, 6 assists in 25 minutes, shot 3 of 10 from the field, including 0 of 4 from 3, was a +8 still, and again, only played 26 minutes. That's massive. Like, that's just such a huge deal. And this is what was missing last year, is games where not even on a back-to-back because you're trying to rest him. The Nuggets were able to rest Nikola Jokic, give him a light workload, and cruise to a win. There should be more of these this season, even if the bench doesn't blow out these teams by massive margin. There will be nights when the starters are better in the second or the third, and creating those margins that the team can't come back from. And also, I'll say this, credit to Malone again, because they got this down to 17, and that's once you cut it down from like a 30-point lead to a 17. Last season, Malone would have been like, I can't risk it. I got to get the starters back in. I can't screw around with this. And he's not the only one. I've seen other NBA coaches that are in that spot that Malone was in last year, where there wasn't a margin, go back to the starters. And Malone trusted the bench. It was like, we can get through this. They got through it. They kept it high double digits, like between, above 15. And that was enough to get rest for the starters at home, bench play great. And it was overall, that win wasn't like a one that Nuggets fans are going to remember for a long time. They'll remember Busy's shooting, right? And Brown's dunk, which we'll talk about in a second. But that's not like a game that's going to go down in history. You need more of those. The Nuggets need more unmemorable games this season of they just smashed a team and took care of business. That's exactly what I, as somebody that have the Nuggets over on win totals, that's what I want to see. And it's going to be good for their playoff positioning as well. That's a really good sign that they got this win. All right, let's take a break. We're going to come back. And when we come back, we'll talk about the bench unit. Got to talk about Christian Braun. Gots to talk about Browntown. Got to talk about more about Busy and how much better he played last night. Got to talk about DeAndre Jordan and honestly Jeff Green and what he brought to the table as well. Got to talk about all these type of things when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I've got to tell you about PrizePicks. All right, so PrizePicks is awesome. You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they will score more or less than their PrizePicks projection based off of whatever stat you want to use, and you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. You're not competing against other people. It's you versus the projections. There's all these tools out there that you can use to find what the best numbers are for these kind of spots. I had Al Horford, for example. I liked his assist over last night because he was facing Cleveland, who plays the most at-level coverage and pick and roll. And we know short roll guys dominate in those areas. On the Saturday, I'm taking the same thing with Draymond Green, over 6.5 assists, because the Hornets play a ton of that coverage as well. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you can watch: NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, the WNBA, esports even, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Eurobasket, cricket, and more. You can get in on maybe trusting that Broncos defense, taking an under on Trevor Lawrence or an over on interceptions. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's just that easy, and they offer safe and fast withdrawals. They're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Just download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100, and if it's $50, they give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us, making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys joining me on a Saturday as I recap the Nuggets win over the Utah Jazz. We'll be back on either Sunday night or Monday with a recap of the Nuggets game versus the Lakers as they seek to put the Lakers in an 0-6 hole. Ooh, boy. And they will definitely be favored on the road versus LeBron. What a weird world that we live in. I want to remind you that, by the way, thanks for making us your first listen. Make your second listen Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most, the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts. All right, we're going to talk about the bench a little bit more here because they obviously were the biggest story in that game. Let's start here. I want to start with Christian Braun. I'll get to Busy in a second. So Christian Braun, credit to Adam. Like, just a huge credit to Adam for seeing this, for projecting it, for talking to people in the organization, what they envisioned, for seeing what Braun could do for you. I cannot help it. So for seeing what Braun could bring to this team. There are there are rookies that come in and provide impacts, and they are game changers, because if you can trust them, if they do give you what you need, if they are difference makers and not just production guys, then you can play them in a playoff series, and it's a different look, and it provides you with a different mechanism, and you can play them in different kind of minute rotations. There's been a lot of talk about the minutes that Braun is playing, and he's playing a lot. I will tell you that the odds of Christian Braun hitting a rookie wall late in the season are pretty high, because he's playing a lot of minutes now, and he's going to wind up doing this across many more games than he's ever played in his life. Right now, Christian Braun is being an absolute difference maker on a team that their older guys can ease into the season, and it's absolutely phenomenal. Braun does a number of things that I think are really impactful. He's really good at digging the ball out in under the basket situations, so he winds up with a lot of steals and deflection. He just comes up with the ball a lot under the basket. The Nuggets have sorely missed that. He's a guy that will get down and absolutely make plays, strip swipes under the basket. When you do that without fouling, that is a high win probability outcome. The best teams in the league will have historically done this. The Heat did this in their run when their defense was really great. The Celtics were really good at this in their defensive run. The Pistons were really good at this in their defensive run. And the Warriors are the best team I've ever seen at it. When you can dig into those underneath the basket when guys are fighting for rebounds and you come up with the ball, that's a really big, that turns, because if a opponent, if it's an offensive rebound and the guy grabs it, and he goes from a low position to a high, oftentimes that results in a foul, because guys are reaching and they flail into him and they draw a foul. If you come up with that ball and you're going the other way, it deprives them of the opportunity. It's a huge swing. And it also often results in the floor being imbalanced, because Christian Braun's really good at getting the ball and then pushing it into the front court. And pushing it onto the offensive side of the ball. There was a time last night when he was in transition, and usually they would have kicked to the wing. He doesn't have that read, and I'm glad he doesn't. He attacked the rim 1-on-2 and finished over the defender. Put his shoulder into Markkanen and finished over him. Those plays are massive. Just the ruthless aggression that Christian Braun plays with delivers a different dynamic to the Denver Nuggets, and that is big time. The block was obviously phenomenal, just like a hyper athletic move, and Malone was stoked about it. He mentioned it, post game. Everybody asked Christian about it. It's just a huge, that kind of athleticism. The physicality that Braun brings was something that I did not know what to expect. Right? You watch him on tape at Kansas, and all the kids in college all look a little bit okay, all right, they're college kids. And then you see him in summer league, and you're like, you know what? He looks he looks ready. He looks very polished. But will that athleticism and strength really translate in the NBA level? And it has. Christian Braun is tough as nails and is physical. And that different dynamic is really great. Daniel West makes a great comment in the chat section and says he's the honey badger. I love that. That's a really good comparison for what he does. Exactly what he did in college. Imagine that. Yeah. Fair enough, but a lot of guys can't do what they did in college at the NBA level. A lot of guys just cannot do that. So there's all these kind of mechanisms. I think he's becoming a fan favorite too. There are guys that really endear themselves to the crowd. DMAC at 1043, who's been at every single press conference over the last year and a half. He talks a lot about the energy that a guy brings to the crowd. And I think one of the things that he kind of picks up on is NBA crowds are oftentimes dead. They're just not great crowds. There are certain guys that really get the all arena crowd going. Bruce Brown, Christian Braun, and Busy are the three that do the most. Jeff Green with a dunk we'll get it going, because dunks are always popular. But he's just really, he's a guy that makes the kind of plays that a crowd appreciates. And the ceiling, he's got so much to learn still. He's going to get better, and the guys are really invested in talking to him. The guys, I will say this, the players seem to really like Christian. They are always talking to him. Let me take that back. Let me actually take that back. Not that they like him. The players on the Nuggets that I see, they seem to really respect and believe in Christian. They are spending their time trying to get him better. I have seen young guys who they have not done that with, because they're like, I don't know if this guy's going to make it, right? Christian Braun, Jamal Murray's in his ear. Jokic is in his ear. Jeff Green's in his ear. The guys are constantly DeAndre, like they're talking to him, and he comes off the bench, and like Peyton Watson and those guys are first up, like fist bumping or like chest bumping him. Celebrations are big. It's the combination of the young guys are enthusiastic about him, and the vets seem to really believe in him. So, hey, Jeff Morton, King of Thornton, he's hanging out in the comments as well. So I think that it's really important to note what Christian Braun does. If he can maintain his energy, if he stays healthy, knock on wood, and if he doesn't get burned out, which there will have to be some management of that, then I legitimately believe Christian Braun can be a playoff impact guy. We're a long way from that, but based off of what I've seen, he could not have impressed me anymore. Let's talk about Bones. Let's talk about Bones. So we've been the Nuggets media has kind of been like, what do you think is going on with Bones? Like, there's a lot of questions about that. About like, what do you think? Like, Bones could, like, do you think Bones is struggling? Like, how much of the bench unit is Bones? I think a fair amount of it. I think he's had trouble creating space. I think he's had trouble finding lanes. I think he's had trouble getting the edge, and he found all those, and that allowed him to create the kind of space that he needs. I think DeAndre Jordan did a better job setting screens last night. This is something that probably needs to be mentioned as far as when people talk about what they want to see. The pick and pop bigs are never going to set great screens because there's simply less mountain of man to get around. And they did a really phenomenal job last night of creating space for Bones. DeAndre Jordan and Bones works together on the offensive end if it's provided by spacing. I don't know if that's going to work versus a Miami Heat. I don't know if that's going to work versus a Boston Celtics, right? But versus the Utah Jazz and the Orlando Magic and the Sacramento Kings and the Washington Wizards, right? The non-elite defensive teams in the league, even with their benches, the combination of DeAndre Jordan and Bones with shooting should work. I don't have any problem with Bones with the shots that he takes, just because Malone kind of talked about this after the game, because Mike Singer from the Denver Post asked, "What's going through your head when you see Bones taking these shots? Like, they can't be considered good shots, right? Essentially." And Malone kind of talked about how, look, this is today's NBA. I can't sit here and hold him to standards from 20 years ago, essentially. He talked about, like, these are the shots that guys take now. This is how the floor is spaced. And when he sees one go in, I know that there's a good chance that more are going to go in. Like, it's really cool to see that from Malone, because it goes against a lot of his principles, I think, historically. Right? The Van Gundy tree is never going to be comfortable with 35-foot threes, but this is legitimately part of Bones' game. And when he hits them, he hits them. Now, I think him finding what the timing is always difficult, right? Because if you miss 4 of those are really low possession opportunities. I will also say this, though. Bones has a pretty good read on things. There's a massive difference between him and a player that a couple of players that play for a Southwest Division team that I will not mention, that they will walk into these 18 seconds left on the shot clock. I'm going to take this 3 now. Bones doesn't do that a lot. Okay, the defense is sagging off me. The crowd's up. We have momentum. It's off a block. I'm going to take this 3. Reading those kinds of moments, I do think is different. And Bones has a pretty good feel for that. And Bones tries to get guys involved. I do think some of his drives are getting tougher this season. I think he's had a harder time finding easy stuff, in part because there's nobody else really on that second unit to make those kind of plays for him. Like, DeAndre's not a pinch post passer, so slip cuts and DHOs are not going to work as well. Bruce Brown, I think, is really good at finding opportunities and connecting for. It wouldn't probably hurt to see Bruce Brown and Bones play a little bit more, like with Bruce with the ball in his hands, just to make some things easier for Bones getting to the basket. But again, if he's going to shoot 7 of 12 from 3, hard to complain about that night. Daniel says every team needs a young gunner that can completely shift the game. Love Bones. Zamora says Bones is so cool because he hasn't had back-to-back bad games. I don't know if I agree with that. I think he's had back-to-back bad games. I think he's had back-to-back games this season. But I thought last night was a big step forward for him for getting his confidence, kind of settling in. And again, I credit a lot of it to the ability to get to that rotation with MPJ in there with that bench unit. Rim roller big, 2 shooters. Jeff Green is connector. Jeff Green played well last night. Like, it all kind of came together. Again, if you look at some of this, I do want to mention Colin Sexton, who has been good this season, was horrible. He was a minus 32 last night. He was terrible. Malik Beasley, old friend of the Nuggets, 1 of 7 from the field. He was terrible. Akbay Abaji actually was really good. I like the minutes I've seen from him. I thought watching, I was like, wow, Taylor Horton Tucker's making all sorts of. Yeah, Taylor Horton Tucker was 3 of 11 from the field and a minus 15, including 5 from 3. So like their bench unit was legitimately terrible, and their starters weren't much better, right? Like Jarrett Vando goes 3 of 7, he's minus 16. They just couldn't score outside of Markkanen. Like they had good minutes, and then Markkanen went to the bench, and that was pretty much it for them. We'll take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk about the game versus the Lakers. I want to talk about some more of Malone's post-game comments and a couple of things about Ball Arena this season that I've seen. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you joining us, and especially the folks on YouTube. 5555-ish says, do you think staggering MPJ with the bench will be the final product, or will Jamal fill that role once he's back to normal? I think they like MPJ. I mean, I can see a Jamal Bones combo instead of Jamal Bruce Brown, right? I could see a Jamal Bones MPJ, Jeff Green DeAndre lineup. Like I could see that happening once Jamal's back up to full speed. So all that is part of it. Okay, so tomorrow, the Nuggets take on the Lakers, who, again, they can put to 0-6 after the Lakers fell to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Anthony Davis missed the last game with back soreness. He obviously was not 100% versus the Nuggets, did not look like it. It's hard to look good when Nikola Jokic is destroying you, but he definitely was, like, not good. He did not play in the game versus the Timberwolves. He was like a game-time decision. I kind of expect Davis to play, but with Davis, it's always kind of a who knows. One thing to note, Russ came in with the second unit yesterday versus the Timberwolves and actually played pretty well. He was pretty good. And so be advised that Russ with the second unit might actually be a thing, considering that Denver's got obviously a better bench unit this year. They just had this fantastic game, but they're going to be inconsistent, and that's okay. The bench gets to be inconsistent. Just something to watch out for. I personally kind of think the Nuggets will win tomorrow. It wouldn't shock me if the Nuggets lost because it's a Sunday game in LA. Historically, this is a tough spot for teams for a number of reasons. You can probably guess why. You spend a Saturday night in Los Angeles, and then you have a Saturday game. And that just traditionally has not been a good spot for teams. Even when the Lakers were bad, that was their highest winning percentage day was Sunday. So, they're desperate. They're obviously desperate. They're going to try and get a win. They're at home, right? You just played the Nuggets. There's a familiarity aspect. A lot of those things going against them, but I'm just not sure that the Lakers are going to be able to score enough. I just don't know. I'll say this. If the Nuggets lose this game, it's because they couldn't find offense. It's not because of their defense, because you cannot play defense and still beat the Lakers because they can't shoot at all. So, I think this is, you don't ever want to be the team that that is the first team that a team beats. You definitely don't want it to be when it's the Lakers. I'm not expecting, I'll say this. I'm not expecting like a Joker goes out, scores 40 kind of performance. I'm not expecting a Nuggets put the hammer down. If they win, it's because the Lakers are so bad they can't. That's kind of my read on this, is that if they lose, it's because they absolutely can't do that. They can't beat the Nuggets. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about Ball Arena. I want to talk about Ball Arena this season, and it's in a good way for once. The crowd so far, and I've only, look, it's the second home game, right? But, or third. Crowd's been really good. Crowd's been really good at Ball Arena, and there's definitely a different vibe. There's not so much frustration. There's not a sense of like dullness. The crowd's engaged with the game. There's real awareness of all the players. They like all the players. There's an appreciation. The energy has been really good in the arena. They've won, which helps. But even when the team hasn't played as good, there's not like the murmuring that I'm kind of used to at Ball Arena. They really sound like the crowd. And I'll say this too. I don't believe that the mics in the arena pick up the sound as well at Ball as they do in some other arenas, because I've heard a lot that like it sounds really quiet. And it's not. Like the crowd hasn't been like OKC every night. I'm judging this against the scale of Ball Arena, but it's been really good. It's been really good. The vibe has been genuinely really good. I'll say this too, even after the losses, right? So they start 2-2, and we were kind of like, oh. And the team has not really sweated it. There's a confidence in this team I haven't seen since I started covering the team 10 years ago. Like in that entire time, even that season, like the 2013 season, they knew they were pretty good. Like they knew they would win most nights, but there was still like a very like, well, see. And I think because a lot of those guys knew that this team wasn't going to be together forever, just based off of a lot of different factors. And they were non-traditional. They didn't have like a superstar. So there wasn't a level of confidence. There's a level of confidence with this Denver Nuggets team, and it bleeds through honestly in the crowd. Like the crowd has that kind of sense. Hurricane says this, and it does feel like this too. I'm actually watching the Nuggets, not just Joker and some guys. That's definitely true. I think because like last year, like, Austin Rivers was like a great story. The guy was out of the league and really worked his way to be a contributor. And Austin gave them good minutes. He helped them win playoff games, and Campazzo was a guy that like everyone respected. You were always kind of aware of like that these guys weren't real impact dudes. And it feels like the Nuggets are filled with impact dudes. Even again, I wanted to give DeAndre Jordan a lot of credit here. I think DeAndre Jordan's been not just not fine, but good. Do I expect that to last? I still don't. I have to be skeptical here. Like I want DeAndre Jordan to succeed. He's a blast to talk to. He's good to be around, right? He's good for media. He fills a need, but I have to be kind of conservative there. Some talk about Jokic here. And so Joker last night, 12, 10, and 6 in 25 minutes. Again, that's just ridiculous that he had 12, 10, and 6. Like he was on pace for another triple-double pretty clearly. Some talk about like he's still feeling his way in. Guys, there's going to be a lot of nights like this. Like Nikola Jokic is going to have a lot of nights where he scores less than 15 points. He's going to have a lot of nights where he has less than 10 rebounds. He's going to have a lot of nights where he has less than 7 assists. And not just the minutes thing. They have more weapons. They don't need him to do everything. That's big. I want to compare this with what's going on in Dallas. I have the over on Dallas Mavericks wins. I have Luka for MVP. What they are doing there, currently, we are just a handful of games in, but currently, Luka Doncic is on pace for the highest usage rate in history, passing Russell Westbrook in 2017. That's their plan. That's their only plan. Like, Mavs fans are really mad at me right now because I pointed this out, and they're like, that's the only thing that they can do. And I'm like, I don't disagree. You don't have anybody else that can run. They got rid of Brunson. They lost Brunson. They didn't replace him. There's not another ball handler. There's nothing else to do. They know they have to. Now, do I think Luka wants this style? I do. I think Luka wants to win MVP. I think Luka wants to make plays all the time. Luka's going to have an absurd usage rate. Luka Doncic is going to put up absurd numbers every single night. Does that bode well for the playoffs? No, it does not. Can Nikola Jokic score 40 if they need to? Yes. Can Nikola Jokic have a 30-point triple-double if they need to? Yes. Like, that's things he can do. I don't expect him, talking about MVP. Guys, MPJ's getting, like, look at these shot totals, right? Like, MPJ only played 30 minutes and had 15 shots. He had 15 shots in 30 minutes last night. Bones had 18 and 24. DeAndre had 6 and 20, right? Bruce Brown had 7 and 30. Bruce Brown, the backup combo guard forward, I guess is the way to call him, had 7 shots last night. Like Aaron Gordon played only 20 minutes and only took 4 shots and it was not good. There's not going to be Nikola Jokic is not going to have one of these crazy usage rates, and that's good. It's better for him. It's better. There's going to be a lot of nights. Honestly, I think there's going to be a lot of nights like this one where they just, whether it's the starters obliterating a team and having Jokic with like a plus 30, or the bench doing enough to take a 15-point lead to a 30-point lead, there's going to be enough of these this season. Again, knock on wood, if they are healthy. There's going to be enough of these to where Jokic is just not going to have to put up those numbers. Joker is not going to put up numbers just because he can, which I think is actually a really good thing about him. And it's better for the team and it's better for his body. So the important thing is keeping him healthy. I'm never going to be worried about him being in rhythm. I'm never going to be worried about him being able to navigate things or being like fading to the background. I understand the problems when he only shoots 4 times. We talked about they lost that game because of the defense. Like they lost that game because of the defense. Joker can shoot 4 times and they can destroy teams. Joker can shoot 20 times and they can destroy teams. So Fernando says, I think Jokic is happier living in this lifestyle as well. I agree. I absolutely agree with that. Let's go wrap it up for Saturday's edition of Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining me as we recap the Utah Jazz. We'll be back either Sunday night or Monday, depending on Adam's schedule, with a recap of the Denver Nuggets. I almost said win game versus the Los Angeles Lakers. Could very well be a loss. We'll recap that for you and get you started next week. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Hit us with those 5-star reviews. Appreciate you guys joining me in the chat on a Saturday. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.